Anthony previously claimed self-defense to officers on scene. Tuesday, we spoke to Russell Wilson, an attorney not associated with this case.
You stare at the screen, your heart sinking. The image is grainy, but the voices are clear. It's the final FaceTime call, the last known contact before the Metcalf stabbing, and prosecutors just made it public. The courtroom goes quiet as the footage plays. Karmelo Anthony's mother is seen pacing in the background, while his father appears to be whispering something just out of frame. But it's what happens at the end of the call that has authorities convinced. The timing, the tone, and the subtle suggestion of premeditation. Sources close to the investigation say this FaceTime wasn't just a routine family check-in. Prosecutors allege it contains indirect references to the confrontation that would unfold just hours later. Investigators had reportedly been combing through the Anthony family's digital communications for weeks. Emails, text messages, bank statements. But it was this video call that became the cornerstone of the indictment. According to court documents, the FaceTime call occurred approximately 3.5 hours before the fatal incident. Prosecutors argue that Karmelo's parents used vague language meant to avoid suspicion, yet still managed to outline a sequence of steps that eerily mirrored what happened later that night. While nothing in the video is an outright admission, legal analysts say the context, their demeanor, their timing, and the later events was enough to raise red flags. As the clip ends, the camera angle shifts and catches one last image, a brief nod from Karmelo's father. It's subtle, but prosecutors are calling it an intentional signal. The defense is already preparing to argue that this is all circumstantial, that no single moment proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But the DA's office believes the cumulative weight of this FaceTime, combined with earlier wire transfers and digital messages, reveals a chilling timeline of coordination. And now, the Anthony parents are facing the full force of the justice system. That phrase, "just remember what we said," has now become a central focus of the indictment. Prosecutors argue it indicates a prior conversation that the FaceTime was reinforcing, not initiating. That alone, they claim, pushes the narrative from speculation into conspiracy. But what made things worse for the Anthonys was the camera angle. A mirror behind the father clearly shows a printed paper on the kitchen table, one that prosecutors believe was a timeline or checklist, although the resolution made it impossible to read. As this evidence was laid out, several members of the gallery exchanged glances. Even a few jurors were visibly taken aback. The weight of the moment, the insinuation of parental orchestration, began to settle in. Meanwhile, Karmelo sat frozen at the defense table, watching his parents on that call again and again, unable to look away from what the state now calls premeditated digital alignment. With the FaceTime evidence now public, investigators doubled down on digital cross-referencing, and what they found only tightened the noose. Just 36 minutes after that call ended, Karmelo's parents exchanged a short, two-message thread on their encrypted Signal app. The texts were brief, almost sterile. "Everything in motion? Yup, just like we said." Prosecutors presented this as the smoking gun, while defense attorneys called the exchange ambiguous and irrelevant.
Karmelo Anthony. Boy. How disappointing in a lot of black people take on the Karmelo Anthony situation.
Federal tech analysts explained the timing was too precise to be coincidence. The prosecution argued that this communication, timed exactly between the FaceTime call and the fatal stabbing, proved conscious coordination. Not only was the conversation hidden from traditional SMS logs, but metadata showed the message was set to auto-delete within 10 minutes. Unfortunately for the Anthonys, a recent iCloud misconfiguration left backups of these texts accessible to forensic teams. But the unraveling didn't stop there. Financial records introduced into evidence revealed a peculiar money transfer just 2 hours after the call. A $1,300 cash app payment sent from Mrs. Anthony to a name not yet publicly disclosed. Investigators hinted this individual may have been involved in transporting or cleaning evidence, though no formal charges have been announced against that party. Still, the timing raised new concerns about the Anthonys' broader network and whether others helped cover their tracks. What's more, Karmelo's legal team, already scrambling to distance him from the murder, now finds themselves needing to respond to the implication that his parents not only knew what would happen, but potentially helped set it in motion. The pressure on the Anthony family has shifted into overdrive, and as the prosecution lines up a parade of digital analysts, the message is becoming clear. In the eyes of the law, this wasn't just a crime of passion, it was a synchronized operation, with breadcrumbs left behind in pixels and pings. The court fell silent as prosecutors played the final FaceTime recording in full, a tense, grainy video between Karmelo and his father, filmed just 90 minutes before Austin Metcalf's fatal stabbing. The camera captured only Karmelo's face, lit dimly in the back seat of a moving car, but the audio was crystal clear. What began as an ordinary check-in quickly unraveled into a disturbing exchange. His father's voice could be heard saying, "You only get one shot to clean your name. Don't let them walk all over you again." Karmelo responded, "I'm not backing down this time." That sentence, spoken with calm precision, was dissected by prosecutors as premeditation. Defense attorneys immediately objected, arguing tone doesn't equal intent. But the state wasn't finished. They followed with a frame-by-frame analysis of Karmelo's facial expressions and body language, citing behavioral experts who claimed his demeanor was oddly composed for someone unaware of what was about to unfold. But it was the mother's voice entering the conversation late in the call that chilled the courtroom. She asked, "Did you get rid of the other thing yet?" Her tone was hushed, almost anxious. When asked later on the stand what she meant, Mrs. Anthony said it referred to an old burner phone that Karmelo needed to return. But prosecutors argued the phrasing, "the other thing," was vague and intentionally coded. They then introduced a voice message from her sent hours later, deleted but recovered via subpoena. "Just make sure it's nowhere near the scene, and don't say anything unless they press you." The jury shifted uneasily. Legal experts say these clips may be the prosecution's strongest evidence yet. Intimate moments where planning, instruction, and anticipation seemed to leak through casual phrasing. In a case already plagued with digital footprints and timelines, the FaceTime call has become the state's linchpin, less for what was said and more for how it was said, when, and to whom. With the FaceTime footage now in evidence, attention turned to the forensics team, specifically the metadata embedded in the video file. Prosecutors claimed the recording didn't just show intent, it proved coordination. The FaceTime call lasted 7 minutes and 12 seconds, beginning at exactly 5:48 p.m. The stabbing occurred at approximately 7:06 p.m. According to expert testimony, this left a tight 78-minute window during which Karmelo drove across county lines, switched vehicles, and allegedly met with an unidentified party before the incident. But what sent shockwaves through the courtroom wasn't just the timing. It was what investigators found on Karmelo's phone afterward, a series of screenshots taken during the FaceTime call. One image showed a blurry photo of a hallway mirror behind Karmelo, small, nearly imperceptible, but when enhanced, analysts noticed a folded object on the table behind him, believed to be the very sweatshirt he wore during the altercation. Prosecutors argued this placed him in the apartment where the murder weapon was later found, hours before anyone else knew a crime had taken place. To make matters worse, location pings placed both of Karmelo's parents near that apartment in the days leading up to the incident. While defense attorneys argued they were simply visiting family friends, prosecutors suggested a more sinister purpose: staging. Then came a final twist. Text messages sent just minutes after the FaceTime call, but before the crime occurred. Karmelo texted his father, "It's done. Just make sure the call's gone." While defense lawyers insisted this was a separate issue entirely, possibly related to a social media threat Karmelo had received days earlier, prosecutors weren't buying it. They claimed this text was a coded signal confirming that their plan was in motion. If true, that would make the FaceTime call more than just a conversation. It would become the final meeting point in what's now being painted as a coordinated blueprint for murder. The prosecution shifted focus once again, this time to a set of bank records obtained via subpoena just 2 days before trial. The documents revealed that Karmelo's mother, Sonia, made 2 separate ATM withdrawals totaling $9,800 within 48 hours of the incident. On the surface, it wasn't enough to raise alarm, but what made these transactions suspicious wasn't the amount, it was the location. Both withdrawals occurred at a gas station located just 6 blocks from the residence of a known Metcalf family associate. Surveillance footage placed Sonia at the scene both times, wearing a dark hoodie and sunglasses, according to the cashier's sworn affidavit. Prosecutors suggested she may have been funneling cash for hush money, possibly to silence a would-be witness. The defense snapped back. They claimed the Metcalf connection was a stretch, that Sonia was simply paying for out-of-pocket medical expenses for a family friend. But prosecutors weren't done. They introduced Jeep's logs showing Sonia's phone had been pinged in the area a third time, this time just 17 minutes after the murder occurred. All eyes then turned to the courtroom projector, which now displayed a timeline. 5:48 p.m. FaceTime call initiated. 7:06 p.m. Austin Metcalf is stabbed. 7:23 p.m. Sonia's phone pinged 6 blocks from the scene. 7:31 p.m. $4,900 cash withdrawal logged at ATM 10392. For prosecutors, the puzzle was starting to fit too perfectly. If the FaceTime call represented the planning phase, this financial movement represented the cleanup. It painted a narrative where each family member played a role, from strategy to execution to silence. And though the defense tried to discredit the timing, suggesting coincidence, not conspiracy, the crowd inside the courtroom wasn't convinced. The energy shifted. Even reporters began whispering, "Are we watching a family cover-up unravel in real time?" By the final day of testimony, the prosecution had all but declared the case airtight. Between the FaceTime call, suspicious financial movements, and strategic positioning of each parent before and after the stabbing, it no longer looked like a tragic accident or impulsive family feud. It resembled a coordinated hit. But just when it seemed the narrative had reached its peak, the state dropped one final piece of evidence that sent a ripple through the courtroom. A deleted voicemail recovered from Karmelo Anthony's father's phone, thanks to a federal forensic audit. The audio, barely 12 seconds long, captured his voice, panicked yet calculated. "Keep it short. No names. We'll say we were never on that call. Understand?" It was time-stamped at 9:02 p.m., a little over an hour after the murder. Prosecutors argued it proved there was immediate concern about exposure, not grief. The defense objected furiously, citing chain of custody concerns and emotional bias, but the damage was done. Jurors were visibly shaken. Outside, public support for Karmelo continued to fracture. Fans who once wore his name on jerseys were now debating whether he could still separate himself from the bloodline. Online hashtags ranged from #JusticeForAustin to #FreeCarmelo, splitting his once loyal following down the middle. And then, like a final nail, the state confirmed that the entire Anthony family's financial accounts were being monitored by federal investigators. The $50K wire was no longer an isolated red flag. It was part of a broader pattern being unraveled behind the scenes. Rumors swirled about offshore transfers, shell corporations, and high-powered legal teams preparing for multiple rounds of indictments. Karmelo, meanwhile, sat silently during the court recess, his head down, fists clenched, and no visible family beside him. As the judge set a date for jury deliberation, one phrase echoed through the courtroom halls. The call was just the beginning. The verdict may not be in, but the message is clear. This family's secrets are no longer theirs alone.